Okay. Kia ora and welcome, everyone. We're about to start the meeting of the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, but first I'd like to have a special welcome to our new member, Māngai Norman Hill. Welcome, Norm. And he tells me he likes being called Norm, so that'll be how it's addressed. So with that, councillors, you've got the sheet in front of you. We've got apologies from Mayor King and Councillor O'Leary. We've also got apologies for lateness from Councillor Southgate and for traditional lateness from Councillor Gallagher. So I'll move that they be received, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Those in favour, against, carried. Thank you. Councillors, confirmation of the agenda. You'll see that the order, we've got things there. Just within the General Manager's report, because Blair has some other matters to attend to for some of the time, we may shift around some of those subject orders, but within the General Manager's report, but we'll advise that at the time if that's all right with everyone. So there's nothing else that okay, so I'll move that the agenda be confirmed. Oh, sorry, Gary.
This is the General Manager's report. There's heaps of really totally different things in there, and it just creates a kind of a funny, and generally all we do is receive it.
Yeah, Gary, we had quite a discussion on the same subject actually at the agenda setting, and we confirmed that the items coming up in the General Manager's report are all items that have come up before, and these are, if you like, progress reports. They're updates, they're not matters for decision, except for a couple of small technical things. And occasionally we do pull things out of the GM's report because they are new and put them into, and we're most happy to take feedback on some of these if they should be full reports and put them in there. That does.
My query is not the fact that the reports aren't comprehensive within themselves, but it's just that you've got a whole lot of incomprehensive reports within an overriding report, and all we do is vote on that, the receiving the group, the omnibus, if you like.
We do pull out a couple for individual recommendations, and I would be happy during the course of the that part of the meeting to do them separately if that makes it easier as well.
Okay, all right.
So I'll just see how you feel when we're discussing items, and that's no particular problem. It was meant not to force staff to do screeds of extra work when it's only an update. Okay. Yeah. Right. But so let's keep that under advice how we handle each area, if that's right.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so Jeff seconded that to confirm the agenda, so I'll put that. Those in favour, against, it's carried. Declarations of interest, Siggy.
Just to item 9, on Ryman Health, we are shareholders with Ryman Health, so I refrain from voting.
Okay, perhaps if you refrain from sitting in the meeting during that and sit in the public area.
Okay.
Yeah, just to make it absolutely clear, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's
because
fine.
You can't really sit at the table without voting one way or another. So if you're away from the table, you can push your chair to the back or something like that.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Declaration of interest.
As previously advised, item 7A, ownership interest in that said property over 20 years ago, and also live in the local neighbourhood.
Is that a declaration that's going to involve you not taking part?
No, because I always have an open mind on these matters, and I have no pecuniary interest, and I retain an open mind.
Thank you. So you'll be staying at the table during that. Thanks. And another member asked whether an item coming up for confirmation in minutes needs to be declared, and I've recommended, and that's been confirmed by Leanne, that's not necessary when it's only in the minutes. It's just recording a discussion that's previously taken place. If it was coming up fresh in one of the items, then it would need to be declared. So just a note there. So we've got them. Public forum, are there any? There's no public forum been advised, but Councillor James looks like he wants to take over that role permanently for the whole meeting. You get the best seat now. Yeah, he's looking all directions. Okay. councillors, on to confirmation of the minutes of 4th of September, page 6. Are there any matters that which councillor wish to raise for correction or query? If not, I'll move that the minutes be accepted as true and correct record, seconded again by councillor Jeff. Those in favour, against, that's carried, thanks. Councillors, the Chair's report on page 19, and just to note where it says in your agenda sheet, separate agenda sheet, I had forgotten to put in an item that the Deputy Mayor had asked me to put in, so I was going to give a verbal update as well in relation to the LG&Z conference that was held, Zone 2 conference that was held in Gisborne. So if I just make mention, and I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if he wants to add to that, that during the meeting that was held 3 weeks ago in Gisborne, the main thing of interest in this area was discussion about the Three Waters situation and the government plans to legislate in that area and what that legislation could potentially look like. And it was probably nothing that we hadn't heard already before. We didn't have any government ministers there, but we did have senior officials from MB, was it, Martin? Yeah, that were there. So I felt that we were already on top of it because we had the reports from Blair and also done our own submission and had discussion about that, and there was nothing new that came up down there. But Martin, you may wish to add to that verbal update.
3 items. Obviously, we also had a presentation by Wellington Waters again, and for us, of course, it was a sense of deja vu as we had to sit there and sort of listen when, in fact, our attempts in the Waikato so far have come to nothing. There's certainly, I think, among some local authorities, a sense of denial, and I found that, frankly, at the Mayor's Forum, which I represented Andrew at and yourselves, in the sense that a number of TAs just think it's going to be enough to do a sort of a joined-up services sort of regulatory approach and cooperate a bit more. That would be my take. But the presentation was very good. The other 2 things that came out of that also, and I'll leave you the last item. One was the use of their regional development funds, and with this new fund that's around the country, and in that Gisborne district, because it's a huge district, it's a Gisborne council, it's a unitary authority, and they are actually using their funds to improve their roading network in terms of the stuff that NZTA can't do within its current budget, because obviously moving the logs to the port and this kind of thing, transport is a huge issue for them. Dave, you may want to pick up on a very interesting presentation by Tasman, Golden Bay, and how you actually might use tyres for energy purposes. I'll leave that to you. I found that was somewhat, from our point of view in this city, it was a somewhat ironic presentation, but we do share the issue of tyres, and this was, and it would be quite good to get a copy of that presentation, because if the trip to Gisborne was worth one thing, it was probably that presentation alone.
Yeah, sorry, I did omit to mention that Golden Bay Tyres has which is based nowadays in Portland, in the, just across the harbour from Whangarei, or from the airport of Whangarei at Onarahi, has developed I guess, an energy production system using burning tyres at extremely high temperatures, but not to just destroy them, but to create energy. And they've received a $10 million grant from the government towards that, about a $30 million plant that they've imported from Europe. And once they get it fully up and running, and they're starting test running next month, sometime next year they'll be able to use the entire used tyre capacity of New Zealand once it's fully tested and up and running. It's a little bit up in the air as to exactly when that'll happen, but they're already starting to truck the tyres in and rail them in as far as they can go from around the country that are in stockpiles. So the problems that we've had in the past, and that where our tyres are spread to around half the North Island, may end up there and be productively used. It is a technology that's in use in some European countries. It's different from, for instance, the olivine one which was proposed for Meremere a few years ago, which was burning to destroy rather than burning to create energy. So I don't know any of the technical details, but we will try and get that presentation because it may be one of the waste solutions in New Zealand, at least for the medium term. So that, like Martin said, that was very interesting. We had the managing director of Golden Bay Cement down talking to us about it. Yep. So, councillors, if there are any other questions, and perhaps I'll just highlight a couple of points. One was our submission to the Waikato District Council on speed limits, and I know councillors Jeff and Mark have both indicated interest in being involved in that. We're basically trying to make sure all of those roads around the outskirts of the city, some of which are shared and some of which are butts right onto the district, end up with the same speed limits. So there's some synchronicity between our speed limits and the surrounding rural speed limits, K Road, River Road, etc., Gordonton Road, etc., though we've already done that one. So that was quite good, and we've also supported Waikato District Council's call for a region-wide approach rather than just a piecemeal individual council approach. I must say that so far the government and the Ministry of and the NZTA haven't responded in practice all that well to that, but I think that is the way to go. You know, otherwise people get confused. They don't know when they cross a boundary between a council and why the speed limit should change on a certain road. The other one was just the issue with NZTA. I want to stress that my comments there don't relate to the senior people in the local office, which we've been working pretty closely with for the last year and a half or so, for instance, since Parakawhia started. But the head office has had, as Chris Allen would call, a high degree of churn, a whole lot of changes, continued changes still going on, which mean their systems and processes have changed, their personnel have changed, and it's affected councils like ours and a number of others in terms of getting timely approvals of funding and other programs that we've put in place. For example, we used to have more or less the second in charge of the regional part of NZTA, James Bevan, attending every Access Hamilton meeting, and he was able to guide and advise us on if we were getting into territory that might cause us problems further down the line with funding approvals, and he was able to be part of that whole process, and we felt like we had a good working relationship with them. When he left, he hasn't been replaced. The people that our staff have had relationships with at head office haven't been replaced. It's taken, you all recall, we've mentioned how long it's taken to get approval for the Gordonton Thomas Road intersection upgrade. Our staff in the end had to go ahead with the construction there in advance of any formal approval, in the expectation we would get it because we were ready to go. Safety requirements necessitated it, but NZTA wasn't ready to give approval after many months. So that's the sort of reason behind those comments in there. They're not trying to drive any change, they're just alerting you to an issue that we're facing. So those are my comments. I open the floor for questions, which sorry, I've got a few here. Gary first.
Thanks, Dave. I wonder if Martin or Dave, you could just expand a little bit on the, I think I'm quoting you, Martin, when I say the denial of some of the local authorities to address their three waters issues. Are they around that they don't have the expertise and may or may not have the expertise in their own water infrastructure, that they don't have the physical infrastructure, that they can't, they've got low density of population? Is it those are the sort of thing?
No, it was, look, Martin can correct me if he had a different take on it, but my take would be that they deny the need for change in a political sense. They want to, it's a bit like the situation with Waipa and us. They did not want to be part of something bigger than them that they weren't totally in control of, which denies the looming quality problems, if you like.
Because that doesn't matter unless they are unable to meet the higher water quality standards, does it?
Yeah, and I think this council has seen that the future is going to be much more difficult in the Three Waters area than that has been. We couldn't say the same for all the councillors we met down there. Martin, do you want to?
It's probably more, I sense one or two, the real script here is that, you know, an amalgamation of water services becomes a kind of thin end of the wedge to some feared amalgamation process. And certainly a comment, I'm not sure who made it at the Waikato Mayoral Forum, I picked that one up. But, and, you know, I acknowledge that there are different models. You know, we went for a particular model, not another model, I get that. But for us all, I'm just making the point, it was, whenever you hear these conversations, you know, and how many $1 million later, or $1 million later in our own money we've spent, it's sort of a here we go again. Yeah, the impression I got from that forum, rightly or wrongly, is they listened very politely to the Wellington Waters, which humbly, personally, I think is a great way ahead. That's just a view. I'm not sure if a number have really got that we are actually, we are on the edges of some serious changes in this area. That's just a personal perspective.
So does that mean, sorry Dave,
Yeah,
does
sure.
that mean that we need that really the ground up approach which we've tried to take, you know, talking to our colleagues, you know, is not working, and that unfortunately it may take a top down approach before anything will happen?
Personally, I suspect that, and if you look or recall, our submission is basically urging the government to take an approach of joining authorities together in some sort of either Waikato type region or what we call them super regions, and imposed from central government.
I mean, bluntly, it's a personalised view that if you wait for local government to initiate major change, it will not happen. You know, the Auckland City concept only happened because it was driven by central government. Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Wellington, you know, don't wait for local government to do major change, frankly. Okay. That's a personal view. I'm only speaking as an individual. I'm not speaking for this council on that.
Yes, that's why I mentioned it was more political than technical, I felt.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Siggy.
Mr. Chair, look, you just mentioned about the tyres for energy, and there is one going to start through Golden Bay Cement in Portland. Did they mention anything about the South Island? Because there's something, I think, I don't know what you've heard of it, an iwi group down there is doing something very similar. And I heard about it when Minister James Shaw came to Hamilton a few months ago. Did they mention anything about that?
They didn't. They were totally focused on there. And then I guess when they said that they could cope with, they talked about the amount of tyres we produced in New Zealand, waste tyres, and their capacity, which was greater than that. So we didn't really ask that question, Siggy, but we'll try and get the submission and give you a copy, and it might be worth you or one of the others in the group, Charlotte, to chase that down.
Yeah, that would be just interesting to find out, because I'm sure the one in the South Island has already started working. So, and they were doing it. Oh, they were doing it for making oil out of it, like petroleum or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'll check that out.
We'll get you the information we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Martin.
Yes, I just, under the submission to Waikato District Council and speed limits, and, you know, with the other cross-boundary conversations that are going to happen, triggered all bit by the disagreement on the library contract quantum, would you see this area, you know, particularly working with people like Rob Maguire, Noel Smith-Axel, Yeah, in terms of the peri-urban issues as well. I mean, it's not. I understand it's a region-wide issue, but I suspect there are a heap of roads on the edges of our borders that are really unsafe for all of our Hamiltonians to
We
use.
certainly agree with that. I guess I personally took the attitude that for a safety reason we better not wait for the political discussions, and there was an opportunity right now with their public process they've got.
Sure.
But Robin, do you want to add something to that, maybe? Because Robin's in charge of that submission, getting it together.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Councillor Martin, and I guess we're working closely with both Waikato and Waipa districts to make sure that we get some good consistency between what we're delivering, both within our area, but also on those roads where we share boundaries or they're immediately adjacent. So as Councillor Dave said, we've got an opportunity now to support Waikato District with their proposed changes, and those submissions are due in by the 9th of November.
Waikato District were particularly keen on support in that area because they had a problem with the last lot of changes they brought in through the North Waikato mainly, and some of the far-flung rural areas with local people in the farming communities opposing the lowering of speed limits on their own roads, supporting them on other roads but not on their own localities, and some of them didn't get through, and Waikato District councillors like their deputy mayor have been really keen for stronger support from the people who do recognise the need for safer roads.
Sure. I mean, that, and I know Axel, for example, is talking about walkways and safe pedestrian strips, and all I'm saying is that I think while we have some series of disagreements, to harness a relationship with the Waikato District councillors who sit immediately on our boundaries, and I think is very positive, and obviously, while we disagree here, we really want to be supporting them wherever we can.
Yeah, I think our submission supports their moves
That's
and is quite specific, and at least 3 of us as councillors have volunteered to go along with staff to present it.
Thank you.
Yep. And Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, without wanting to be repetitive, I was going to talk about the same issue really, and really think we sort of need to congratulate Dines for his approach there, and we need to really forcefully support what they're trying to do, because as we well know, it's those roads on our boundary that are often some of the most dangerous in our city, because they're just not designed for the highest speeds, a lot of them, and they catch people by surprise. So I'm really, really excited about this. And secondly, I just wanted to just endorse you really for your comments about NZTA there. And I think, as you said, it's not aimed at the local people here. It's more frustration at some of the processes. When I think of the interim rail service, that's been a long, drawn-out process with a lot of hours in this council from yourself and Chris Allen and many others. And it just feels that it maybe didn't have to be quite so long at times. But to me, it just spells out some of the issues that you get with restructuring. And having come from 14 years at Fairfax, I know all about restructuring. And a guy like James Bevan, who we started with at Access Hamilton, was just so good and so helpful. And you could see that we were going to get things done with him because he was actually showing us the way to go. And to lose him was a real blow. But I think we also need to emphasise that these guys. They do operate within some constraints of their own. We absolutely need them. We wouldn't be getting anything decent done without NZTA as a partner. So we appreciate what they do, and certainly at a local level. But I do wonder whether maybe just following on from this, Dave, because it isn't a public forum, whether or not we can take it a step further with perhaps a sit down with NZTA, and just to see if we can have a free and frank exchange of views on this and try and make some more progress. Just given that you've made this public statement here, maybe we can just take it a step further.
Yeah. Look, I'm most happy to try anything like that, and I would suggest we initially try and set it up through Parakawhia, the regional director. I might add that about 3 weeks ago, or thereabouts, the chair and CEO of NZTA were here for a presentation down at the Ferry Bank, and our mayor and CEO had a meeting with them afterwards where they discussed both this issue generally and some specific things, and didn't feel like they got a great hearing. Is the summary of what they've said to me. I briefly spoke with the CEO just before the meeting started, and he asked me how I felt the relationship was going, and I said the relationship was okay on the surface but was moving very slowly with approvals, and some of the staff came and had a discussion with me afterwards. They seem to have heard this not just from us but from other councils as well, but yet nothing has changed, so it wouldn't hurt to raise it again, I feel.
Yeah.
I think, to be fair, local staff feel a bit hamstrung too, but they are not in the position, the NZTA staff, they're not in a position where they can speak out. Yeah. Is there any other comments? If not, I'll move that the committee receives the report, and seconded by Ryan. Those in favour or against? Carried. Thank you. We're on to the item 7, the encroachment licence at Anglesey Street, for which the mayor has an open mind. Deputy mayor, sorry, has an open mind. And who's giving that? Robin. And just note, because James is hogging the seat down there now, the staff and other outside presenters, when they're coming up the table, are going to talk from here at the moment. This is part of the interim changes.
It seems to be 2 reports.
Sorry, what's happened, and Robin will talk more to that, is we've attached the old report, which had a lot more information in it, as background info for the new one. So
sorry, it is attachment. Yep.
Yep.
So that's attachment 1. That's the former report, is it?
Yes, starting on page 26 is the foot, and that was given to.
Sorry, on the 4th of September. Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And some of that was given actually at earlier times as well. I think Robin, anyway, I'll have a hand up to Robin.
I initially thought they were identical reports. Thank you.
Just the same heading. Thanks, Robin.
So good morning, councillors. I'll take the report as read. Just following up from Councillor Gary's comments, there was a report initially to the 4th of September meeting, and while we spoke, or Chris spoke very briefly about that, we did ask for an extension of time to meet with the residents in the area, which we have duly done, and we have with them worked up some additional clauses that and requirements that we would like to see included in the encroachment licence to ensure that the fencing is appropriate to maintain vistas, and that there's an agreement in the way that the banks are maintained into the future, and any trees are removed, etc. So on that basis, happy to take questions.
Okay, we've got questions. Mark, thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Chair. So this is quite different to that deputation we had some months ago from the residents and the developer wanting to develop on those lands. Different people, different situation entirely, is it?
Same neighbours, similar neighbours but different people.
Yeah, it's not the same property.
But it's a different issue entirely, is it, right? No?
Sorry,
Martin, just...
I withdraw. I'll save that for
Yes, thanks.
Okay, that was helpful. Robin?
I'm not sure about a previous delegation, sorry.
No, I'm just wondering if there's a bigger area map, it doesn't quite cover it. But if you look at the map on page 27, or the aerial photo, and you see the red dot is where the current situation is.
Yep.
The land that was proposed for development is right at the bottom where Cobham Drive meets Hillsborough, just off the bottom of the photo.
Yep.
That also is entered via Anglesey Street, the top of Anglesey Street, so that's where it comes to what the Deputy Mayor's talking about.
Right.
So it's not the same property at all, but it is in the access from across the road from this one, literally. if you look at you can see all the little property numbers coming in off the side of Anglesey there, and they're all accessed from that, effectively the end of Anglesey Street, as is this property.
Right.
Physically accessed, but not by road.
So, just so I'm clear, so this developer, Van Verden Illing Commercial, they are a different developer, is that right, to the one, or are they the same people?
Yeah, Chris is here to help. He's just arrived. They're a different developer from the other one that wanted the public land.
I believe so.
Oh, yeah, cool, thanks. That's much clearer, thank you.
Thanks. Rob, thanks.
Chair, my question is around the encroachment licence. Does that sit on the titles of the properties in the sense that if the current owner sells, then the encroachment licence remains a potential commitment for future owners?
So it does sit on the title, and I'm just trying to find in the original report, basically the basically on page 31, item 29, clause 29, it talks about the fact that it is on the title. Yes, it's second to last bullet point under clause 29 on page 31.
Okay, so looking at that earlier report, there are 7 apartments that are being constructed. Are they all separate titled apartments, or are they cross leases, or are they is there a body? I'm looking here for, to make sure that in future, while we might have a commitment from the current, or from the developer, I'm wanting to make sure that we are protected if we have 7 separate owners going forward, or through a body, or if it's through a body corporate, so that council are not left hanging around having to fund costs because perhaps we haven't got it sufficiently tied up at this particular stage.
I'm not 100% certain on the legal status of those, but that's certainly something that we can work through to make sure that it is applicable across all of those.
Can I suggest that we perhaps take this to Tompkins Wake and get some sign off to make sure that they conclude that council will be fully protected going forward?
So
should
Rob was going to
So we
suggest that we
already
actually add a clause in to
Right.
that effect,
Yep.
so that it's sort of a conditional on that what you're suggesting happen.
conditional on legal sign off?
Yeah,
or
I'm wondering, Chris, whether you'd be able to work out something there, following up what Rob said, since you know the property intimately.
So a further resolution that just,
Or just a part C, perhaps, to that,
Yep.
that the approval is subject to
or even an add-on to A, Chair, where we're talking about the encroachment licence.
yes.
One or the other anyway.
Appropriately goes with A, yes. We'll work on that during the discussion and come back to
Yep,
that.
no, it
Check
sounds fine,
that.
thank you. That's
Thank-
my question, thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Martin?
Probably, I think, Chris or Robin, the latest recommendation, does that have now sign-off from the immediate neighbours?
So we met on site and agreed with them what the conditions were going to be.
Yeah.
I have shared a copy of the report with them. I've had feedback from one but not from the other. But basically we made a point of going through very strictly and working out what the exact requirements were, and we have reflected that in our report.
I'll raise this in general debate as a principle. What I find massively unusual is that we sign off a development.
Well, sorry, Martin, if that's not a question, do save it for debate, or...
I guess the question is perhaps to Chris, is are we using this particular history of this development as a bit of a trigger to re-examine our processes where there's potential encroachment.
Sorry, can you speak to the
sorry.
microphone? Yeah.
Yes. Are we using this particular development where access issues were not sorted at the time of the signing off of the development, particularly as they relate to public land, to look at our processes in future?
Yes, following this instance, we would be bringing all licences that involve public land to council. So we had interpreted the delegation because we had a 3-month get-out clause that the delegation was with us. Another interpretation of the delegation is because it's permanent or over 12 months, that would bring it to council. So we've determined that we will bring matters like this back to council in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks. Paula, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That kind of in part answers my question, because I raised that last time when we had that other encroachment issue. What's the policy that sits behind this? Because I guess we have to be consistent with policy, but sometimes you need to look at policy and see if it had unintended consequences. Of course, I would be interested in things like cumulative creep and whether that had implications for the wider public, but also in what circumstances and how much would we expect to allow a reasonable encroachment? Would it be for safety or access or whatever? I don't understand any of the criteria in any depth, so every time we get one of these, I'm wondering when we'll see that criteria and understand how it operates at that broad level, not a time by time, which does lead to death by 1,000 cuts sometimes.
Yeah, Chris or
Sometimes.
Robin, Paula's got a good point, because each one that comes to us seems to be a different circumstance, and it's not certain, apart from the process of coming to us has been confirmed, but is there some level thresholds that guide that, or is it it is literally case by case, I suppose?
Yep, I think we probably need to take that away and do some work. At this point in time, my view, it is case by case. As a general rule, we do not agree to encroaches in the road reserve, and this is generally fixing up historic issues. This one is a particular case where as staff we were dealing with the issue, and that's the mistake that we've made. So we would bring that back to council as it was emerging. But I think there is a case for, just as Councillor Southgate has said, maybe to look at that in the context of a policy.
Because we have had issues with pool encroachments,
Yep.
with park encroachments,
Yep.
and with road reserve encroachments in the past, and they've all been different circumstance. In my memory, they've all been handled a bit differently too.
Yep. So that was crossing my mind, that the way we deal with them for recreation reserve encroachment is different than road reserve. So we need to join the two together and come back to council. I think it will come back to committee.
Yeah, so I'll just raise that as a question, if we can, and also some understanding of what other types of encroachment have been dealt with, so we can have a broad understanding. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So if we make a sort of an action note, if we can, between Chris and Eva, Lisa and Robin, and for that, thank you. Leo, thanks.
One question, if I may, Robin, is on paragraph 29, it says that the company will be responsible for maintaining encroachment structures.
So you mean in the appendix, do you, Leo?
No, on page 31.
Yep.
Yep.
Sorry.
So this goes on forever and a day, that he's responsible for maintaining the steps, retaining wall and the fence?
Correct.
Okay. How would we enforce that?
If the structures are not being maintained, then we have the ability to withdraw the encroachment licence and to require those structures to be removed.
So if he goes out of business in a couple of years' time, how do we stand then?
Again, it will be around, so it relates to the title, but the property owner will be responsible for that if it doesn't happen. And it's primarily about protecting public safety and making sure that any structures that are within the road reserve are safe.
Okay.
Leo's point, I'm not sure whether it was totally, there'd be more than one owner. The developer will have gone,
That's right.
sold to individual owners. Do we have the ability to, realistically, to enforce and make sure there's mitigation by a group of owners?
I believe that by having it against the titles, yes. So
Yep.
following up through what Councillor Rob has suggested,
Yep.
then we have that ability because it makes it very clear on those responsibilities.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Gary, thank you.
Thank you. On page 21, paragraph 4, the paragraph says, a further meeting on site with residents has been held and an agreed position developed regarding their specific requirements within the encroachment licence in relation to the fencing style extension, blah, blah, blah. How is that document or that agreement got documented?
So that agreement was basically verbally made on site with the neighbours that we met.
And is it going to be, that must have to be documented, surely?
That will be, well, it's been documented in this report and it will be included in the encroachment licence, those additional requirements.
So how, down the road, how is anyone going to say, how does Bob Smith say, no, I didn't agree with that, I wasn't at that meeting, or I didn't think that's what you meant when you said that, and I don't know who Bob Smith is either.
I guess we made it a publicly available meeting and we had several residents there, so we've tried to capture that, and then we've followed up with we had a couple of key residents who had basically been nominated as being the spokespeople for that area.
So you haven't got signatures on anything?
No.
I guess legally
that
the
can't
signature
surely stand.
The signatures required are the owners.
Yep.
And the council, who own the public space. We're acting on behalf of the surrounding neighbourhood, if you like. In a legal sense, I take your point in a community sense, but legally we're the ones that are acting on their behalf and recording the agreement on the encroachment licences between us and the apartment owners.
Okay. I guess my comment would be is that, I mean, it's just doesn't seem legally robust and sort of enduring, and maybe that's the same sort of comment that is coming from other members.
I think that's the point of Rob's request, that we address that issue, that we make it sure that it's legally enduring and something council can enforce and is realistic, I suppose, as well.
Sorry, so did Rob move an addition to the...
He will be, they're just
Okay.
working on it at the moment.
All right.
So before we start the debate, I'll bring that, check that the wording's okay. Chris has just done. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Norm, thanks.
Kia ora tātou. I just wanted to ask a question around consistency in terms of the various reports. And I note that in some of the staff reports, these cultural considerations. And I just want to ask the question around what does cultural consideration actually mean in regards to Waikato Tānui. And I make specific reference to the Waikato Tānui Environmental Plan, these specific chapters in there that make reference to infrastructure, the three waters, etc. And so I note that some of these reports don't have cultural considerations. Can you just explain why is that?
I think and genuinely that's a point of learning that we need to make, and to better understand how we can incorporate that into our reports moving forward.
And I think particularly given that this is in the vicinity of the river, that it's sort of probably vital from now on that we do. Chris, did you want to...
No, I was just going to confirm Robin's comment that moving forward we'll be looking just how we address the cultural matters. In this particular case, we didn't believe that there were any cultural matters to address, and perhaps we should have said that in the report. But we look forward to working with Mangai Norm just to do better in that area in future reports.
Just an extension on that. Kia ora, thank you for that reply. I think another point is around engagement. again, consistency around the reports in regards to culture consideration and engagement with mana whenua. Yep.
Thanks. Can we hear the wording if you're ready? Are you? Oh, hang on, there's a bit of negotiation going on. A little bit of negotiation going on. We'll just wait for that briefly because I prefer to have that up on the wall before we start the debate. But if you want to discuss it, put your name on the list. We're all looking at you two. Sorry, everyone, we're just better to get this right if we can now. What's that? But you can look outside. Yeah, yeah. We're going to start having jokes soon about how many staff does it take to write a motion. Usually I'm rewriting Chris's motions at about 11:30 at night. We don't usually do it in meetings. It's the last joke we want to hear from you today. I did ask you where your blue high-vis jacket was that Councillor Ryan told us about the other day. I think you should have left it there. Are we nearly ready? Because otherwise we'll go on to another point.
I think we're there now.
Okay, we're just about to get it up on the wall. Okay. Okay, so it's the yellow highlighted bit that's remaining as point A. It also includes, in reference to Paula's question, highlighted in grey, or yellow as also, a new B, and then B becomes C down the bottom, Amy. So there's two additions there. Just give you a sec to take that on board and I think B, sorry, just with B, if you can say request staff report back to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, specify that.
On 2 Anglesey Street?
No, on an encroachment policy, because that's the more general one that Paul.
I'm agreeing with Gary there, I'm not sure whether we've got enough in A.
Sorry, in A, I think it meant that my intent was to put enter into an arrangement regarding the ownership of 2 Anglesey Street.
Okay, subject.
That was the issue about whether it was unit titles or regarding the future cost fees or whatever, regarding the ownership arrangements of appropriate party.
Future ownership arrangements.
Or just, yeah. Don't know whether it's, I don't think it's future, it's current as well as future. Put by March, G&I committee by March, down below, and B by March 2019. Right? Sounds like someone's election speech, something. Okay. Ownership of. The of goes after ownership. So, and that would refer to the chief executive being given the confirmation, because rather than it coming back to this committee under A, because the chief executive is given. No, he just said, sorry, you delegate chief executive authority, so that's where the confirmation goes.
Could we do, I mean, through the chair, could we just do a quick report back to this committee on that, on A, once it's gone to solicitor? Because I think there's a little
Well, I
bit
think
of,
staff can undertake to do that. I don't want it to
just in a can happen in a GM report.
Martin. Staff can send a memo around, yeah, about what's happened as a result of that.
Could I just ask a question?
Sure, Rob.
How often do we invoke an encroachment licence? I'm just wondering, is there enough evidence to suggest that we should have a policy on something that we might only do once every 5 years?
So we can respond in terms of road encroachments, Rob?
Yeah, so I guess we have an increasing number. There's also a new piece of legislation going through at the moment, which is the Land Transfer
Look,
Act.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think,
And if we don't need to have it as a full policy, we can decide that when this one-off comes to us, if that's all right. Yeah, I think that's the way of handling it. Okay, are people familiar with the wording there? Gary, you're looking puzzled about the wording?
Thinking whether I'm puzzled enough to ask a question or not, so just leave it with me for a second, please.
Okay, I'm just trying, so I've got, we'll go to, I'll move that, sorry, I should have done that to start with. A, B and C as shown, seconded by Paula. Our Paula's down to speak, and then Jeff, and put your name on the speaking order, please. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just to keep it quick, fully supportive of B, not necessarily that we end up with a policy, but that we think about a consistent and approach to dealing with this. We've only had a couple come to us this term, but I am aware this is exactly the sort of thing that can end up being done, no disrespect to staff, in an ad hoc way, and the unintended consequences long term we won't know about. We've got the best interest of the widest portion of the public, I believe, to hold. And I was just going to say, in terms of A, though I've approved it, moved it, seconded it with you, that highlighted area doesn't assume that there will be any ongoing legal implication for future owners, the way it's worded there. It's just suggesting that that's the appropriate party to enter into this arrangement with. That's how the wording reads. So I'm still interested in making sure there again that, you know, where we give encroachment rights, that the legal future of those as well, taken care of in respect to council's considerations. Thank you.
I think a staff report that was given before made it clear how they would approach that. If it wasn't kept to by one party, then the other party, us, is able to take action to remove the
I agree
licence.
with you, Dave, except that we all know how once something is done, especially a built structure, or land is lost through some means, it's incredibly hard to undo it. So it's getting it right at the front for me.
Good. Okay, thanks. Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I think it demonstrates a good outcome. there needs to be flexibility occasionally, you know, when circumstances dictate it. Not every situation sort of falls into a tidy little box, and I know in this situation there's been an awful lot of work done, a lot of discussions with the neighbours and those involved, and we all know these sorts of things are not always easy. So it seems like we've got a pretty good outcome. We've got agreement from everyone. So and the neighbours have kept their views, and so it seems to be a satisfactory outcome. I totally agree. I think those are good points raised about the legal robustness of it. We need to ensure it is. So I'm pleased to see that's been added in. I support this. It's good.
Thank you. Martin, please.
I think if you look, I'd invite you all to look at the picture on page 23 of the agenda, and that illustrates, now that fence and that sign is across public land, and it's very interesting that Mangai Norm Hill raises even cultural considerations, because public land is public land, and I would have expected that fence and sign to have been done as a result of the appropriate agreement at the time of development of the property. Whether or not that happened, I don't know. Perhaps it did at the time. But I think it's a really good example as to why these type of things would come back to a relevant committee of council. I'm not necessarily criticising the developer as such, but I am criticising the vacuum in which this type of situation has entered into, and this particular matter has gone on, and the public interest here that I understand, and I'm not, because I live further down the road, but I do know the neighbourhood, and the public interest is served by maintaining reasonable sight lines to the river, and ensuring that when anyone is developing next to a public reserve, then the rules around that are sacrosanct, and there's some very clear rules of engagement with neighbours at the very beginning. The issue was, and I alluded to before, you recall another development down near Cobham Drive on the other side of Anglesey Street off Hillsborough Terrace came for this council. It was subsequently withdrawn, but the reason this council was involved is that, as I understand it, there was some agreement wanting to be reached in terms of access via public land or use of some public land in order to facilitate a scale and a type of development. And indeed, the neighbourhood was left basically in the dark until a very good councillor alerted them. And this is all in the public arena at the time. But it seems to me what we've got to do, without in any way compromising and hindering the rights of a developer, is we must ensure that from the word go, those most immediately affected, the neighbours, are immediately alerted, because obviously anything to do with public land should be in the public arena, and there should be an early alert system. But I do agree with Norm in the sense that this is a really good example of why we need to get all of this stuff in terms of cultural, public access considerations, bearing in mind that we have a massive gully system in this, so it's not just a particular river next to a river reserve or a road reserve. We've got all issues of gully reserves and that kind of thing, so I'm really looking forward to a really good discussion to make sure that these kind of things don't necessarily happen in the way they've particularly happened.
Thanks. Rob, please.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'll be supporting this too. I think, as Councillor Southgate said, there needs to be some consistency in the approach that we take. But I think also in this case it's a signal to us that we need some legal robustness around a policy and an approach going forward. As I see it, on this particular site, there will be 7 units, potentially 7 different owners, and whether we have to deal with each of those 7 owners individually or once through a body corporate, we need to make sure that we've got some legal oversight on that, so that we know exactly who we go to for maintenance and so forth. I think Councillor Mallett raised the other neighbours, and I think if I look at that particular area of land, either now or in future, it's likely that there will be significant development around there, and there will be a lot more sites with 7+ 7 or 7+ units on what are existing 1 or 2 sites at the moment. So I think long term there's a bit of a minefield there that we need to make sure that we've got our legal areas well and truly covered off with a decent legal opinion from the solicitor, from the city solicitor, that protects this council going forward. Thank you.
So I'll just chuck in a couple of comments as well. Firstly, like to thank councillors Rob and Paula for the points they've raised, and Leo and Gary and others, because I think at our agenda setting meetings we got focused on the nitty-gritty detail of this particular issue and the fight between the neighbours and the developer, rather than looking at the perhaps two bigger pictures that you've highlighted. So apologies for that, and thanks for raising it here. Probably something that the neighbours really would have got upset about if the original plan for that bit of Anglesey Street had stayed in place, which was to build a bridge straight across from there to the Wellington Street area of Hamilton East. Then they really would have had something to worry about with the traffic. So that's not happening. And this but it isn't quite the quiet cul-de-sac that they had perhaps bought into 20 years ago. But apart from that, I think this is will actually draw out some of those longer term issues that we need to look at so that we are consistent in future, and I support it. There's no other speakers. Paula, you didn't want to speak again? Okay, thanks very much. I'll put the resolution by show of hands. Those in favour, against, it's carried unanimously, thanks. We'll only go to the board if there's, Norm, if there's clear dissension. Now, just something that Leanne's just put in front of me, Māori TV doing a news piece, I guess it is, on the Māori members of our committees, or on the fact that we've got them. They're here today. They've asked, they're going to interview Norm at some stage later this morning, but they've also asked if they could shoot film of the meeting, so I'm proposing to say yes. It's a public section, they could shoot without sound, but does anyone regard that as important in this?
We've got the YouTube anyway.
It's on stream anyway, so if they really wanted to see, anyone can see that, so they're free to do that. Thanks. We'll move on to the. They must be out.
Yeah, it's probably at least an hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you can. If you see any cameras, Gary, then you can start playing to them. Okay, page 30. Oh, sorry, Paula.
Question on that, I'm just looking at the agenda, and we're making good progress.
Yep.
We've got the general manager report's got bits in it. You can't put them into the public excluded bit, so just to be mindful of if they're an hour away.
Oh,
Yeah.
Do you think we'll be...
there's any issue.
Paula,
any
we haven't
doubt?
started the GM report yet, so don't talk about making
I
progress.
don't know, I was feeling very optimistic.
You'll jinx it. Okay, page 33, thanks, councillors. And just a note, we're going to hold the strategic regional collaboration segment until Blair gets here after 11. Other than that, we'll just go through them in the order they are. So we start, and I'm going to talk about the paragraph name. The GM concerned will make the comments and get questions on that, and we'll deal with them one at a time like that. So it's starting with the Auckland-Hamilton corridor and the Greater Hamilton growth strategy. So Jen's going to start with that.
Thank you, Morena councillors. So no further update really in terms of where we've got to following the full meeting on the 11th and the broad conversation that happened at that meeting around the Hamilton to Auckland corridor and also the Greater Hamilton growth strategy. So work is progressing on both of those. Progressing so well that in point 9 on that report says that there is a governance group meeting on the 26th of October. Work is progressing so well that that governance meeting has been cancelled, and the final draft corridor plan will go to that group for approval in December.
just on that, the governance group, or essentially what has now become it, actually had a meeting with the minister here at this council 3 weeks ago-ish, I suppose, anyway, so it was felt that was just going to duplicate it and let's move on faster. So questions on that? If not, we'll move on to Te Waka. This is also Jen.
And just a brief update on that as well. So Te Waka is well on its way to being set up fully as a business. You'll recall at our last meeting, Dallas Fisher introduced Michael Bassett-Foss as the new Chief Executive. He's been on board for 6 weeks now, so still really early days for him. And later on in November, in the middle of November, he will be presenting a strategic direction for Te Waka quite broadly. Blair Bocott is on the establishment board. He will remain on the establishment board for the next 4 to 6 months as they transition to a more permanent board. Once they have recruited those new board members, both he and Rob Williams from the Thames Coromandel District Council, so the 2 local government members of that board, will transition off the board, and Te Waka will go on its way. I also included in this Chair's report probably a little too much detail, but the board report that went to the Te Waka board following the summit. I know there were lots of questions from you around that summit and what happened. So that report really just it's now a month or so old, and a lot of progress has been made since then. So the summit really was just a gathering of ideas and a gathering of people around Te Waka and what Te Waka wanted to achieve. So significant amounts of work has gone on since then in terms of bringing those ideas together and refining things and fleshing things out. So, and as I said, in the middle of November, Te Waka will be ready to put their best foot forward in terms of their strategy from here. Just on one other point is that both Blair on the establishment board and myself now, as I assume operational responsibility for Te Waka within council, and Vaughan Henry, who's our key account manager and has been working hand in glove with Blair on this to date, will continue to do so. We've all been very strong voices for Hamilton's place in Te Waka, and there is no doubt that Hamilton will play a central role in the economic development and prosperity of the wider region. So our voice is very much being heard, and we're very much part of the conversation and the direction going forward.
And that Te Waka report that Jen referred to is page 47, attachment 1, if you're looking for that. So, Mark, questions?
Thank you. Very last point, Jen, with Te Waka, and I noticed the summit, none of us were kind of invited along to that. I think Ryan had to sort of get through the back door to get in there, and I was really glad he was there. And I appreciate that you guys are very strong advocates for us, but where does this body of representatives get to put input into that in the future?
So they will be here on a 6-monthly basis with a report.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the summit, the mayors were invited, but it was a broad range of people. What they wanted to do was have some elected members, so the mayors were all invited, but wanted to really engage with all of the other stakeholders and with business owners as well. So there will absolutely be conversations for you to have with Michael Bassett-Foss directly around this table.
Right, but and I'm just wondering, at that point, he's reporting to us on what has happened in the past. Is it going to be enough in your mind to, for us to, if we want to have input into that sort of stuff?
That's probably not a question for me. The question is really for you. What kind of input do you want?
I think, to be fair on that point, there was a request that some other councillors be able to go and attend that summit, which left a bit of disappointment when that didn't eventuate, even though we put in a fair chunk of the money to get things up and running. So that, it felt like people outside those who put up the money were making the decisions on who was going to be involved in structuring this. I think, I don't know whether that's where Mark's coming from. But
pretty much, and I'm certainly treading a fine line because I certainly don't want to look like anyone's trying to dominate or pull strings. But I think as a reasonably significant funder, this body needs to be very well in the loop when it comes to in a slightly earlier phase of that.
Sure. Well, would you be happy if I had a conversation with Michael about potentially a briefing,
Yeah.
so we can have a
Yeah.
more broad conversation about where they're going and
Yeah.
plans, so they can keep you a little bit more
Yeah,
engaged.
thank you, that'd be really helpful.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, great.
No problem.
Thanks.
I'm done. Thanks.
Martin, thank you.
Yeah, Mark's basically said what I wanted, said very positive development. To me, it would be a bare minimum, the mayor of the day, the chair of the GMM or deputy of the day, the GM in your area of the day, Blair, etc. I mean, we're 40% of the GDP or whatever we are. We're not Otahonga, we're not Waitomo, and I accept that you don't want to have it politically dominated because you want to hear entrepreneurs and all of that. I do get that, but I think we should say that we're not just any old TA, and you know, because as a unit of local government, we sit across a huge part of the GDP of this region. So I think that's the message we'd convey. It is a minor point. It's moving forward. The development we're, I think, really enthusiastic about. And so that report's we're going to get a 6 monthly, a bit like the tourism stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, and that'll be, and I think through the chair, that's a really good interaction because we are, as a funder, one of the significant stakeholders.
Yep. Thanks. Gary, thank you.
Thank you. Just the word pitch and things like that keep coming up in the report. Each table made specific and actionable possible, blah, blah, things like that. What, just remind me, this is not a funding agency, is it?
No.
Not going to fund anyone's business or anyone's bright ideas. It's just a overarching developing the scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely, and to support new ventures going forward, to make connections.
And how would it do
with
that?
people.
How would it support a new venture?
So just by bringing the right people to the table and encouraging the right kind of conversation and putting people in touch with the right kinds of people. They've also been very active in terms of putting together the pitches for the Provincial Growth Fund.
What?
The Provincial Growth Fund.
Yep.
So the two that
This is the Shane
have
Jones
been...
thing.
Pardon me?
That's the Shane Jones
The Shane
thing.
Jones thing, yes. So we're very involved in the two that got approved for, is it Waharoa and Morrinsville recently. So that's their role.
Through this grouping, did it? Through this?
Not through the summit specifically, but Te Waka worked on those projects. So the pitches that you're talking about there was just really about how they ran the day to get the creative juices flowing.
Okay, thanks. Paula, please.
So,
Gary.
sorry, but there's a whole lot of priority areas that have come out of this. You know, there's talk about hotels and sustainable parking, sustainable farming, beg your pardon, Waikato tourism, cycle rail, blah, blah, blah. Those came from where? From within that group at each of the little tables they were in?
That's
Is that how it worked? Okay.
That's right. And so just a reminder that this list isn't the end. This was very much just the beginning. So I wondered if I was going to go down a rabbit hole by putting that in. But so where they've got to now is they didn't just take the ideas that the pitches that each table agreed on the day. They have taken every idea that came out of that summit, every post-it note that was left on the wall, and have reviewed absolutely everything. And what's going to happen in November is that they're going to come to the table with some driving principles and some focuses. So at that time, that's when we'll have a clear direction for the organisation rather than what you see in front of you today.
Okay. On page 51, which is page 5 of the actual document, I think, page 51, there's a triangle or a pyramid. Can you just walk me through that?
So this is not my report.
Yep.
A lot of walking to get through that.
Yep. Someone needs to explain it.
Okay, so that again, this is a report that went to the Te Waka board. I am happy to have...
This, at the food fest, at the whatever the thing...
No, after that.
The Brains
After
Fest.
that, this
Okay.
is a report that went to the board from the Te Waka executive to explain what they'd got out of that event and how they needed to framework it going forward. But as I said, in mid-November, they will have a direction where they will be able to present how they're going to move forward. And I imagine that they use a framework like this in order to progress.
Okay, so you've found it, you think it's important enough to put in the report to us. Can you just explain what it says?
So what I wanted to do was to give you a flavour of what happened at the summit and how they were going to progress. So I have taken the full board report that they provided after that and put it in here for your information.
Okay, do you understand it, the pyramid?
Oh, well, I do. I do in the same way that you do. I mean, I'm not a...
Oh, I don't. I'm honest enough to say I don't. I can't follow it, so that's why I've asked you.
Okay, cool. All right. So what I can tell you about this is that what it does is it takes what they call the determinants of prosperity in the bottom and overlays the sector opportunities which are specific to Hamilton in terms of putting those two things together to drive prosperity for the region.
Waikato or Hamilton?
For the Waikato.
Yeah, you said mentioned to Hamilton.
Oh, did I? Sorry, I meant Waikato.
Okay, so we can take from this that education, schools and talent, plus housing, plus natural resources, plus all of those things on the bottom are like the coal that you put into your furnace to generate something else, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the things that are important over and above business growth that support the broad economic development of a region.
And then what does the next lot up say?
So the next lot is the group of key sectors for the Waikato.
Okay, so the people at the meeting determined those were the things that they thought in their experience were contextually related to the Waikato region, do they? So like I can't see movie making or...
No,
yeah,
so I
like
think that these are a combination of sort of the intelligence of the group in terms of the people in the room, but also there is a whole lot of research that goes in behind all of this, which I think they mention in the report as well.
Okay. And then you get some drivers of prosperity, which is employment, productivity, population. What are they? I mean, a driver is a cause, isn't it? Employment, productivity and effect? So they've mixed up cause and effect there, haven't they?
I think you've reached the extent of my ability to describe the framework in this report.
Gary,
but I would be very happy to have Michael Bassett-Foss explain it if you're particularly interested in it.
Well, no, if he comes to a workshop, if we can set up the workshop like you were suggesting, then that's where we're going to be more easily able to question some of that sort of stuff from their board, I would have thought.
Sure.
Yeah. It is just important that we can understand the reports we get.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Paula, please.
Yes, so I'm just interested in how we connect with Te Waka going forward in respect of integrating our responsibilities and core actions. Like we're just looking at that same page 51 with the conceptual model. What are the mechanisms that are going to ensure, because we are embedded in a number of the enablers, especially the lower down the pyramid ones, in particular housing, social and community capital, built environment, cultural capital. Did I say housing? I did, didn't I? And then if you go up the pyramid, there's tourism that we could have a key part to play in, construction services potentially. And going up towards the top, where there's some drivers of prosperity, we've got employment, population, employment, productivity, which we play a role in, but also I didn't see education unless I missed it. New glasses, by the way, so I'm still getting used to them. It is down the bottom.
As an enabler.
In the enabler, good-o. There you go. But in terms of how we do what we do in an integrated and cohesive way with what they do, is there a mechanism that we'll put in place?
It's quite early days in terms of how all of that comes together. So part of what Te Waka are looking at the moment is their operational business plan and how they transition from a startup organisation into one that is adding value. And they have a 9-month plan at the moment in terms of setting up, getting them up on the skis, if you will, and then it's about taking some of those projects and supporting those going forward. In terms of, Te Waka doesn't absolve the Hamilton City Council of its responsibilities
No,
in
I
this
get
economic
that.
development area. And we, this is Vaughan Henry, Vaughan will continue to play a role from Hamilton's perspective in all of that. But equally, as you rightly say, that we still have responsibilities in housing and all of those other things, and we will continue to push forward. So really it's about making sure that we are really connected to Te Waka, and that, more importantly, that they're very connected to us, but also to other stakeholders within the community who are also doing their piece. So they have a significant role at the moment in terms of making sure that they are building those relationships and joining all of those strands together. So it's still a bit of a work in progress in terms of how we do that. But you know, I've had a couple of meetings with Michael now. He's been on board for 6 weeks, and we'll continue to work on that.
You know, I agree with everything that you said at the front end of that, especially it doesn't abdicate us from any role. But how do we maximise the opportunity? And I suspect that through you, Mr Chair, if we are able to get something at a later date about what the mechanisms are to ensure that what we're doing on the ground as a city are properly connected to Waka, or any findings that they derive are properly translated into the work that we do. That's what I want to know. And no disrespect, it was a good answer, but it didn't actually answer the question, except to say that it was early days. And
I think, Paula, that's one of the things we'll be wanting Jen to do when she sets up the workshop, is to make sure that those sorts of questions are addressed during the workshop, and we can provide the feedback and formalise whatever we need to as a result of that.
I just don't want a parallel and apart process.
No, I think there's broad agreement on that. Ryan, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Jen, please do continue to show those reports. It gives us visibility, and I understand it opens up a bit of a can of worms, but it is
Rabbit hole, she said.
Yeah. I was just wondering, Chair, is it all right to speak on the other issues, or do you prefer for Jen to ask questions as it progresses step by step, maybe?
Well, we're doing Te Waka at the moment.
Yep. Okay. So I've got some other questions. So shall I leave?
Not to do with Te Waka.
Correct.
No, wait. Okay. You'll get another chance. Okay. Norm, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. I note the triangular model there, which is actually similar to what Waikato Tainui has aimed to achieve in terms of whakatupuranga 2050 and the aspirations and for our people and our environment. There's like a mauri or korowai that can be encompassed or overlaid across this aspirational triangle. My question relates to, it might not be relevant at this point in time, but the joint management agreement between Hamilton City Council and the tribe, and how Te Waka could also be an enabler to help amplify and support that, paddling in the same direction, if I use that analogy, on Te Waka. How can that be a supportive mechanism to help enhance what's been achieved through Waikato Tainui, notwithstanding that our tribe is paddling in this direction? So we collectively we could work together strategically on that. Is that factored into the conversation?
I think that's a very good question, and I definitely know that the rivers and the environment more broadly are key to what Te Waka are doing. I don't have a direct answer for your question, but I'm going to note it down.
So again, we need to make sure that those questions and yourself, in fact, are able to be involved in the workshop session that we have.
Yeah, the reference to Hamilton City and obviously Waikato, again, Waikato Tainui has a strong association with the whenua land. Big component of that is land resources and tikanga and kawa, how that's employed and deployed within the strategy.
Okay. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks.
Gary, final question? Just a
You're being optimistic, Dave. Jen, on page, okay, so it's our page number 56, 57 and
I should never have mentioned where this report was. You wouldn't have found it.
Don't worry, I was on it, mate. 56, 57, 58, there's a grid and it's called full, am I coming through? Full summary of Waikato Economic Development Summit priorities. And on the right-hand side of that, there's a column which has got a score. And I presume it was out of I'm just guessing, I assume it was out of 100, you know?
I don't know. Do
Okay,
you know, Paul?
it looks like the best score was 64, then nothing else failed to make
We all voted
halfway.
the whole summit.
You can take from this is that.
But sorry, June. And then there's, under that concept, make our region grow and look after our kids and all that sort of stuff. So what do we take from that? That this has come out of it, and what?
And forms the basis of the work that has happened since then, to have a broad look at the way in which Te Waka can support the region to grow, and that in the middle of November they will come back with a more concise direction for the organisation and how they're going to do that.
So presumably the fact that Te Waka o Waikato got a 64 score, would I suggest that they will be spending more time on that than they would be on Te Kuru, which is the last one, which got a score of, poor thing, got a score of 1. Is that what I should expect or not?
So I can't answer that question. They will. I mean, I think what you can take from that is that tourism was a key part of that conversation, and I imagine that tourism will be a key part of what they are looking to deliver. But like you, I have to wait for direction from them in terms of where they're going.
Okay, all right. Please don't take this as criticism, but, and it's not your fault, it's just that when we have a report that no one really knows about, it's a bit difficult to ask and receive
I think when we
information
get
from
the
it.
6 monthly reports, Gary,
Okay.
we'll have the people from, like we do from tourism and the airport, we'll have
Okay.
the key people from those organisations here, and we can grill them over that sort of detail. This was meant to be an introductory thing, and you dug up the rabbit hole.
Well, I mean, I guess you just, you know, this has the potential to be big, or it'll fall under its own weight again, like many other instances have occurred.
Yeah.
So somewhere on the line, I assume there will be. Well, we're already putting ratepayer money into this thing.
Two actions will come out of this for this
Yeah.
group anyway. There'll be a 6 monthly report from the organisation, but prior to that, there'll be a workshop of some description, briefing for councillors with key people from that organisation present, so we can go through how it's being set up, how it's intended to be run, the key areas that it's going to work in, that sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely, and I appreciate your feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, councillors. Let's break for morning tea until 11:15 by that clock up on the wall. And let's remind Paula that she said now that we're going along quickly, or some words to that effect. Okay, we'll start on strategic regional collaboration with Blair when we come back. Thank you.